So I'm out in the shop just kind of tuning up some of my tree gear, you know, like my climbing stuff. In particular, I've been working to put just like a really small first aid kit, just like a little micro first aid kit on my harness. So that got me thinking, why not do like an overview, like a full description of the stuff I carry on my belt and the belt itself. So I think to do it right, what I need to do is string up my climbing line here in the shop and show you the harness in action. Yeah, first shot. Lacking an adequate basal anchor, we're gonna have to go with the dual rope system here in the shop. I kind of prefer the single rope, but you know, for indoor climbing, dual's pretty good. All right, now this is gonna be an overview of my harness setup. It's gonna be like a walkthrough of the tools and the setup and the orientation and all that stuff, but I gotta say that it's also gonna be a little bit about my kind of philosophy behind gear, climbing, and tool belts, you know, like your orientation to the tools in your immediate vicinity. All right, so I'm hooked up, but let me just get a couple more pieces of gear, because first we're gonna talk about all the stuff I always carry with me. This is like the absolute bare minimum loadout. All right, so that's it. That is the bare minimum loadout for pruning, tree removal, pretty much any job. This is like the minimum. This is like the stuff I've always got with me. So I would say that the two main ideas that kind of inform the way I load out the harness are sometimes at odds with one another. The first is safety. So this is kind of first and foremost a safety harness. It's PPE. This thing is supposed to keep you alive in the tree. Like the whole idea is to go up there and to come down in one piece. But then with that said, it's also equipment, like work equipment. These are all tools. So in a sense, this is not just a safety belt, this is a tool belt. And as a tool belt, I gotta say that my loadout and the way I set this baby up is deeply informed by my experience doing construction work. So let's pull back a little bit over here and take a look at some of my previous harnesses I've used up in the trees. You're gonna see that I am all about keeping it as minimal and kind of simple as possible, and also as low budget. I'm just not one of those dudes who goes with the gourmet multi-$100 top of the line harness. That's just not it's not my jam. If that's your thing, that's cool, but that's just not my thing. So here's a history of harnesses, every harness I've ever used to climb a tree. All right, so the first one I ever used was my Black Diamond rock climbing harness. Love this harness, super lightweight. I used to use it on roofing jobs just to kind of tie in for extra security. And I started using this in the trees. It has a single tie-in point and some gear loops. And you know what? It kind of sort of worked. The main difference between that guy and tree cutting harnesses is that tree harnesses have D-rings on the sides. So what I did after the Black Diamond harness is I got a cheapo, super cheapo harness, and I modded it just a little bit so I could get some rings on the side. So I sewed a cargo strap to the back, had my rings on the side, and I was good to go. Did a couple tree jobs with that guy, and then thought I would do just a little bit more, like a little bit more modification to my Black Diamond climbing harness. Now, this was my favorite climbing harness for a long time. Lightweight, comfortable. You know, something about the leg straps and everything was just comfortable. So I modded this with some rings. Not D-rings, but it's like welded steel rings on the sides. And, you know, did a couple trees with this harness. The thing about it, though, wasn't for me that I thought it was overly janky. Now looking at this, you're probably thinking that's overly janky, but for me, the problem was comfort, which is why I ended up throwing down like $100. I think it was $100 on this notch saddle. And the deal with this guy is that it's actually got a seat built into it, right? So these guys are leg loops. This guy had the seat, and you know, I thought I'm getting a little older. I'm gonna sit down when I'm working. And I love this thing. I use this thing for many jobs. The downside on this harness, this notch harness, is that it doesn't have a bridge across the middle. So it's got a D-ring here and a D-ring here. But then in the middle, you gotta lock into these two Ds. And it just doesn't want to kind of rotate too much. So sadly, I moved on from this harness. It had a couple modifications though that I carried on to the harness I'm using now. So I got this notch harness for, I think it was 50 bucks on sale. But you'll see that the difference between this guy and the previous one is that it's got a floating D on the bridge. It just kind of lets you rotate a little bit better and move back and forth. Otherwise, the thing is totally the same. I think it's just a size smaller. All right, I did make a couple modifications to this guy. I added a pair of construction suspenders. Two reasons for that. Number one, it allows me to click in up top to my sender. They will kind of drag behind as I climb. I can put my whistle up here. But I think the main reason I like the suspenders is that it keeps the dang harness up. This harness will kind of, you know, start to sag on you and get all pulled down and stuff. But the suspenders keep it up, and they mean I don't need to crank down on the waist belt quite as much. And the way I modded it was just by kind of working some paracord on the front sections. I thought it would be good if the chest harness was ultimately breakaway. You know, if it got like hooked on something. So I used paracord there, not the strongest stuff. And then around back, I just punctured the harness with a punch and put another paracord loop. All right, I'm gonna throw the harness on the bench so we can look at all the stuff I got on it. All right, so first we're gonna look at the stuff on this side of the table, which absolutely goes up the tree with me. And then all this stuff over here is sort of optional depending on what the job is. All right, so you saw my climbing saw, and then I've always hung my saw on some kind of DIY lanyard. This is the latest one I came up with. It's got a bungee internally inside here, and it's got a breakaway beaner. So like just a plastic beaner. So if the saw happens to get hung up, and that has happened to me a couple times, if the saw gets hung up, the beaner can go and it's not going to drag me down with it. I've also sewn a loop in here so I can hang that guy on my shem beaner over here and just kind of quickly, you know, pull it on and off. I've always got a couple of lanyards. One is a steel core, you know, straight up with a rope grab. And the other is a DIY lanyard that I made up, and it's getting a little bit of wear. When this guy gets too worn, I'll just replace it. It's just a length of climbing rope, beaner on one end, and you know, again, a pulley on the other. I got the shem beaner. This one, you know, I threw down. It's not DIY, but I like it. It's just a hook. It allows you to easily, you know, hook stuff on there. I always carry this old carabiner of mine and a gree-gree. This is a old school descender, ascender, rappel device. If all your other stuff fails, it's gonna get you down the tree. So I carry that, and I carry a prusik cord. Prusik cord, just if I need to, you know, tie on to a rigging line or something like that, give it some more control, or in a jam at the very end, this could get me down the tree on my rope. So again, over here, this is kind of like safety stuff, a little bit out of the way in the back. I've also got a knife, and this is like almost nothing. It's just a razor blade knife. I think it's by Gerber. Yeah, I'll put a link down here to this stuff. Actually, all this junk, any of it that came on Amazon, I'll put a link to it down below. That'll give me like 0.01 cents. I carry a knife just in case I need to cut myself free. I was at one point kind of stuck in a tree many years ago, and I could have used a knife. So I told you about my suspenders. They're hanging right there. And then back here, I've got a couple extra carabiners. They just come in really handy for me when I'm rigging stuff up in the tree, making connections and whatnot. I always carry a couple extra beaners. And I carry a plastic carabiner. This is a junky breakaway beaner, which I will attach to my lanyard in the event that I don't want my lanyard to actually tear me down. So if I've got like a top anchor, you know, I've got like a rope up top and I'm attached to some skanky tree down below, I will attach with some kind of temporary breakaway situation. So if that tree goes down, it'll break and I'm not going down with it. Plastic carabiner. You can use a zip tie, a piece of string, piece of paracord. There's a lot of ways to do it. All right, working our way around, I've got this kind of Petzl utility carabiner back here. I kind of hate it. I can never get stuff off of it with one hand. I end up having to reach around with both hands. So I kind of hate that thing, but anyway, I use it to just carry my wedge. And I'll show you this deal. It's just a micro wedge. You can use this guy if you're chunking down a big stem and stuff gets kind of wibbly wobbly. Just palm this guy in there, stick it in. It'll keep your log from falling the wrong direction. When I'm using this, I will just clip this like on my shirt or something like that. So when the log falls and this falls, I don't lose it. All right, then over here on my left hand grab spot, right? This is like my non-saw hand. I'm cutting over here, right hand. This is my hand where I'm grabbing stuff. I've just got two things. I've always got my notch quickie. If I need it, it's there. Sometimes I use this guy down at the base as like my base anchor, basal anchor, so it's not there, but I keep it there. I like it. I probably should get another one. It kind of takes the place for me of a steel carabiner. Or I will use one of these guys, these big old ring carabiners, these steel guys, but I don't know, they're heavy. I'm kind of sold on the notch quickie. I dig it. All right, then what is this beast? This is like a 2-in-1 kind of thing going on here. I've got all of my DIY slings right here. They are all the same, sort of. I made them with some tubular webbing, and they are not loops, but they are long slings like this. They've got a loop at this end, and they've got a loop down here with a black diamond carabiner. I got a bunch of these on eBay cheap, which is when I made these slings, and I basically use them to tie off limbs, zip lines, all that kind of stuff. They're all sitting here on a figure 8. So it looks like I got too many slings, man. It's like, why does that guy got too many slings? But you probably know that I do all my jobs alone in the tree, and I use a ton of slings. I actually sometimes bring up a second bunch of slings. All right, just a couple more things about these slings. I also carry 1 or 2 alternate slings. These are like long boys. Sometimes my DIY stuff isn't long enough, or sometimes I need to create like a redirect or something, and I'll use one of these guys. So anyway, that's my sling action, and they're all sitting there on a figure 8, which, as you know, is a descender device, belay device kind of thing. Occasionally I will use this for rigging. So I'll pop these guys off, hang them on my loop, and use the figure 8. But I don't do that often, so they just kind of sit like that. All right, with all the necessities on the belt, let's do a little weigh-in. The basic loadout, including the saw, we got 22 pounds. And then the belt without the saw is just about 13 pounds. So I guess that means when I'm doing my pull-ups and stuff, I should really be strapping on an extra like 20 or 30 pounds. All right, working our way around, I got a silky saw, which, you know, I kind of don't like this saw. It's the Suriguri or whatever. I'll put a link to it. I like it because it's small and light, but it just doesn't cut like my bigger saw. So yeah, it's not that I don't like silky. It's just that this small saw, I don't know, it just doesn't cut as well. I've been keeping that on my left side. Now, that's kind of a problem because I'm right-handed, and if I pull across, I could potentially cross my cutting line. So I've been keeping it over there. I'm kind of experimenting with it. I try to pull it left-handed and pass it to myself. And you know, it's like an extra move or whatever. So on jobs when I need this a lot, you know, like pruning jobs where it's just all handsaw work, I will hang a saw on my right side. This guy easily comes off. Just kind of undo this knot and it slips right off. All right, so including the brain bucket, this is all the stuff I've always got with me. You know, all the harness stuff, couple of lanyards and a saw. Now let's dig into the more elective materials. You know, like depending on the job, you might need it. Sometimes I take this stuff up and sometimes I don't. I got a couple friction savers that sometimes go up the tree with me. This one is DIY, the other one is store-bought. Kind of like mine a little better because it's lighter and thinner. A bunch more lanyards. Again, I use a lot of lanyards. I'll sometimes take a couple of these guys up just because they are like different lengths or more hardcore or whatever, sort of depending on what I'm doing or what I'm using them for. And you saw already that I climb on the notch rope runner. That's like all I use now. You know, I started out doing the Blake's Hitch stuff, but forget about it. I just use this guy. I've got a foot ascender and a knee ascender, which I'm just starting to use. I kind of wimped out and got the knee ascender. I was just using 1 foot ascender. And then more stuff I'll bring up sometimes, you know, like sometimes I'll use a pulley. I've got this little backup safety device, which actually doubles as a pulley. It's almost like a rope lock, but it does have a pulley mode that you can kick it into, so it'll just work as a pulley. I'd rather have this guy in the tree because it's like a multi-faceted tool. You know, it's like a rope lock and a pulley. Then have one of these pulleys with me. I will occasionally use a ring on a redirect if I know I'm going to be doing like a big pruning job in like an oak or something. But you know, I don't always have these with me and tend to get by with just a carabiner. Same deal with the paw. Sometimes I'll have the paw, and occasionally I will bring up a big old figure 8. This is the figure 8 with the ears, or a rescue 8, whatever they call it. I'll bring up one of these guys if I know I'm going to be rigging off my figure 8. That way I have one to rig off of and then one as a descender. All right, more extra junk. Just to the base of a tree, a sandbag from time to time just to weight my rope. A water bottle on the hottest days, though I prefer a water bottle backpack. I've got a few DIY ring sling, multi-sling things that I've made. And this one's nice because it'll work on like a really small limb or something just massive. The whole thing's like 8 or 9 feet long. And then if I know I'm going to be doing some solo rigging up in the top of the tree, I'm planning on bringing one of these guys. I just made these, you know, last couple weeks, so I haven't had them up in the tree, but these are just some ring sling type dealios that I'll be able to you know, just kind of centralize my anchors a little bit better with. This is a steel beaner and this is a paw. And then there are extra ropes. I will always bring a secondary lifeline with me, you know, one to climb down on if my other thing just doesn't work out, and some kind of rigging line. All right, you've seen it in the tree. Now you've seen it in the shop. That's my basic harness setup, you know? Ton of stuff to carry with you. Some of it will save your life. Some of it will help you get your job done. And some of it will do a little bit of both. I should say, this is not really like a how-to video. I'm not saying this is the way you should do it. Instead, I'm just saying this is the way I do it, and thanks for checking it out. All right, see you in the next project.